Best wishes to you both!
People called me a Lagos baddie before they ever asked me my name. They saw the clothes, the confidence, the late nights, the way I walked into beautiful rooms without begging to belong, and they decided I was the kind of woman men should enjoy privately, but never choose publicly. What they did not know was that I was tired of being watched, tired of being desired, tired of being misunderstood. I wanted something simple, something almost impossible in a city where everybody is performing. I wanted to be loved by a man who did not need my father's name, my family's money, or my polished image before he believed I was worthy. Then I met Ethan Cole, a billionaire who had everything except joy. And by the time he discovered who I truly was, love had already placed both of us in a position where one truth could either save us or destroy us. The night everything began, I was standing outside a mansion in Ikoyi, with my hand on a glass door, listening to the man I loved explain why his family would never accept me. Ethan did not know I was there. His voice was low, tired, almost ashamed of itself. He told Mason Reed, his closest friend, that he loved me, that I made him feel alive, that I was the first person in years who made him forget his work, his pressure, his name. Then he said the words that held me still. He said his parents would never understand a girl like me. A girl like me. I remember staring at my reflection in that glass, my makeup still perfect, my heart breaking quietly behind my chest, wondering how many times a woman can be loved and judged in the same breath before she finally stops explaining herself. At that moment, I had two choices. I could open the door, walk into that room, and ask Ethan what exactly he meant by a girl like me, or I could turn around, get into my car, and disappear from his life with my dignity still shaking, but standing. But love does not always give you clean choices. Sometimes love makes you wait for one more sentence, one more explanation, one more sign that the person you trusted will defend you, even when you are not there to beg for it. So I stayed. And what I heard next changed the way I saw him, the way I saw myself, and the way I understood the city that had been clapping for me in public while quietly using me as a warning story in private. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Because this story is not just about a rich man and a beautiful woman. It is about what happens when people confuse appearance with character. It is about the private conversations families have when they think the woman being discussed has no power, no history, and no name strong enough to answer back. It is about the kind of judgment that follows a woman into every room, even when she has done nothing wrong except look like freedom. And most of all, it is about the danger of testing love with a secret so heavy that when it finally falls, everybody in the room must reveal who they really are. My name is Olivia Brooks. At least, that is the name most people knew me by. In Lagos, names can open doors, close mouths, change attitudes, and rewrite people's opinions in less than 10 seconds. But I did not want that kind of love. I did not want the kind of respect that arrived only after someone whispered my father's name. I had grown up around wealth, around polished floors, quiet drivers, family friends with private jets, and parties where people smiled with their teeth, but measured one another with their eyes. From a young age, I learned that money does not remove loneliness. Sometimes it only teaches people how to hide it better. So when I became old enough to move through Lagos on my own terms, I made a decision that confused everyone who thought they knew me. I stepped away from the weight of my family name and allowed people to meet only Olivia. That was how the label started. Lagos Baddie. People said it like they understood my whole life from a 10-second video, a fitted dress, a soft laugh at a rooftop lounge, or a photograph beside a car that was not even mine. Some people imagined I was careless. Some imagined I was hungry for rich men. Some imagined I was the kind of woman who lived only for attention, champagne, and expensive rooms. The funny thing is,
Attention was the one thing I had never lacked. What I lacked was peace. What I wanted was not another man trying to impress me with a table at a club or a weekend in Dubai. I wanted someone who could sit with me when my earrings were off, my lashes were gone, my phone was silent, and the room was ordinary. I wanted someone who saw me after the lights came down. Ethan Cole was the opposite of everything people expected me to want. Yes, he was wealthy, but wealth was not what made him interesting. In Lagos, rich men are everywhere, or at least men who want you to think they are rich. Ethan was different, because he did not seem to enjoy the life everybody envied. He owned companies, sat on boards, travelled for meetings, and lived inside a schedule so tight it looked less like success and more like punishment. He was young enough to have fun, but old enough to have forgotten how. By 35, Ethan had become the kind of man people praised from a distance, while nobody asked whether he was happy. His days began before sunrise and ended with emails he answered alone in a house too large for one man's silence. Mason Reed was the only person who seemed brave enough to tell Ethan the truth. Mason had known him before the suits became darker, before the meetings became endless, before family expectations settled on his shoulders like a second body. One evening after Ethan cancelled another birthday dinner because of a business call, Mason told him that being alive was not the same as being successful. Ethan laughed, but Mason did not. He told Ethan that money had made his life easier, but it had not made his life lighter. He told him he needed somebody who could pull him out of the office without asking for a contract, somebody who would make him remember what laughter sounded like when it was not performed for investors. Ethan dismissed it at first, but people only laugh off the truth when it touches a place they are trying to protect. The party where we met was not supposed to matter. It was one of those Lagos nights where everyone looked expensive, even the people pretending. The room was full of perfume, soft lighting, familiar strangers, women taking pictures before sitting down, men pretending not to look while looking at everything. I had come with my friend Ava Lane, who always said I needed to stop rejecting invitations just because I was tired of being misunderstood. Ethan had come because Mason dragged him there. Years later, Ethan would tell me he almost stayed in the car. He said he looked at the entrance, saw the lights, heard the music, and immediately wanted to go home. But Mason took his phone and told him that if he answered one more email, he would personally throw it into the lagoon. When Mason introduced us, I did not know Ethan was watching me before I saw him. I only noticed him because he looked uncomfortable in a way rich men rarely allow themselves to look. His suit was perfect. His shoes were polished. His watch could pay somebody's rent for years, but his eyes looked like they were searching for the nearest exit. Mason smiled like a man creating trouble on purpose and said, "Olivia, meet Ethan Cole, the only billionaire in Lagos who needs a written proposal before he agrees to enjoy himself." I laughed because the insult was too specific to be fake. Ethan looked at me, surprised that I laughed so freely, and said, "I suppose that makes you the woman hired to rescue me from myself." I told him nobody could rescue a man who still wanted to be bored. That should have been the end of it. A joke, a smile, a brief conversation at a party neither of us planned to remember. But there are people who enter your life quietly and still manage to divide it into before and after. Ethan did not flirt like other men. He did not ask who I came with, where I lived, what I did for fun, or whether I wanted to leave with him. Instead, he asked why I looked happy and sad at the same time. It was such an honest question that I hated him for noticing. I told him maybe every woman in Lagos learns how to look happy in public. He did not laugh that time. He just nodded, as if he understood what it meant to carry a private life under a public face. We talked for almost an hour while the party moved around us. I teased him for standing like a guest at his own trial. He admitted he had forgotten how to relax without feeling guilty. I asked him when last he did something that had no benefit, no strategy, no profit, and no reason except joy. He thought about it for too long. That silence told me more than any answer could. Here was a man the city called powerful,
and yet he could not remember the last time he had chosen himself. Before I left, he asked for my number, but not with the entitlement I had grown used to. He asked as if I could say no and still remain human in his eyes. That was the first thing I liked about him. Our friendship started with small messages. Ethan would send me a picture of his desk at midnight, and I would reply, "Congratulations, you are officially married to your laptop." He would send a tired emoji, and I would tell him even billionaires deserve sleep. At first, I thought he was only entertained by me. Men like Ethan often liked women like me in controlled amounts. Enough to laugh, enough to escape, enough to feel young, but not enough to change anything that mattered. So I kept my distance. I did not ask for money. I did not ask for gifts. I did not tell him my father was Richard Brooks, the man whose handshake could make powerful people stand a little straighter. I let him think I was simply Olivia, the Lagos girl with sharp mouth, soft heart, and too many opinions about how he was wasting his life. The first time I took Ethan out properly, he came dressed like he was attending a shareholders' meeting. I looked at him and asked if he planned to acquire the restaurant. He looked down at himself, confused, and said he thought he looked normal. I told him normal people do not wear cufflinks to eat suya. He had never eaten at that spot before. His driver looked more nervous than he did. Ethan stood beside me under the Lagos night air, watching smoke rise from the grill, listening to people call out orders, smelling pepper and onions and fire, and for the first time since I met him, he looked present. Not impressive, not guarded, just present. When he tasted the suya, he coughed because of the pepper, and I laughed so hard he accused me of trying to end his bloodline. After that night, something opened in him. I showed him parts of Lagos he had driven past for years without entering. Live music on a quiet Sunday evening, art exhibitions where nobody cared about his title, beach mornings where his phone stayed in the car because I threatened to throw it into the water. Long drives where we talked about childhood, fear, grief, and the strange loneliness of being surrounded by people who needed something from you. He told me his parents loved him, but their love came with instructions. They had built a life around reputation, and they expected him to protect it like a family business. I told him reputation was a hungry thing. The more you fed it, the more it demanded. I should have told him then. There were many moments when the truth stood at the edge of my mouth, waiting to be released. When he spoke about wealthy families, as if I had never sat inside one. When he described the pressure of being known before being understood. When he told me his parents wanted him to marry someone from a good family, someone quiet, respectable, and easy to explain. Each time I almost said, "Ethan, you have no idea how well I understand that world." But I kept quiet because I was afraid. Not afraid he would reject me if he knew I was Richard Brooks's daughter. I was afraid he would accept me faster. I was afraid his eyes would change, and suddenly every laugh, every confession, every soft moment between us would become contaminated by my surname. The closer we became, the more Lagos started talking. Lagos always talks. It talks in salons, in private lounges, in church parking lots, in family WhatsApp groups, in office elevators, in the back seat while drivers pretend not to listen. People saw us together and created stories. Some said Ethan was only catching fun with me. Some said I had finally found a man rich enough to fund my lifestyle. Some said a man like Ethan could never marry a girl like Olivia Brooks, not because they knew me, but because they knew the version of me that made them feel wise. I heard these things and pretended they did not hurt. But there is a special pain in being insulted by people who would beg to stand near you if they knew where you came from. Ethan began to change in ways everyone noticed. He laughed more. He left work earlier. He stopped treating rest like weakness. His staff whispered about it. Mason took credit for it. Even Ethan's mother, Eleanor Cole, noticed. She began asking questions that sounded casual but carried weight. Who is this young woman? What family is she from? What exactly does she do? Why is her name appearing around you? Ethan tried to avoid answering too much because he knew his mother. Eleanor was elegant, intelligent, and terrifying in the quiet way only wealthy mothers can be. She did not need to raise her voice to make a room feel judged. Ethan's father, Charles Cole, was more direct. To him, marriage was not just love. It was alignment, family interest, social balance, and public image. For a while, Ethan tried to keep both worlds apart. With me, he was relaxed, open, almost boyish. With his family, he became careful again, measuring his words, avoiding my name unless necessary. I saw it before he admitted it. Women always know when a man is proud of them in private, but cautious in public. It is in the way he changes when a call comes in. It is in the way he says your name softly around certain people. It is in the way he tells you to understand, to be patient, to give him time, as if patience has never been used to keep women standing outside doors they deserve to walk through. One evening, I asked him directly, "Ethan, are you ashamed of me?" He looked hurt that I could ask. But hurt is not an answer. He told me he was not ashamed. He said his parents were complicated. He said they had expectations. He said they would not understand my lifestyle. That word again, lifestyle. It sounded small, but it carried so much judgment. I asked him what part of my lifestyle made me hard to respect. The clothes, the parties, the confidence, the fact that I knew how to enjoy my life without apologizing. He reached for my hand and said I was different. I asked him different from what? He did not answer quickly enough. That pause told me his love was real, but his courage was still negotiating. And love without courage can feel like a beautiful house with no door. The night I overheard him, I had gone to his house because he asked me to come over after a long meeting. I arrived earlier than he expected. The staff knew me by then, so they let me in and said he was in the smaller lounge with Mason. I was walking toward them when I heard my name. Something in my body stopped before my mind understood why. Mason was speaking first. He asked Ethan if he was serious about me or just enjoying the way I made him feel. Ethan said he was serious. Mason asked the question everybody else had been circling. "Can you marry Olivia?" The room went quiet. Then Ethan said, "I want to, but my parents will never accept her lifestyle. They will think she is just one of those Lagos girls. Just one of those Lagos girls." I had heard strangers reduce me before, but hearing Ethan repeat the shape of their judgment felt different. He did not say it with cruelty. That almost made it worse. He said it like a man trapped between what he knew and what he feared. Mason asked him if he believed that about me. Ethan said no, but he also said proving it would be difficult. He said his mother had already seen pictures. He said his father would ask questions. He said nobody in his family would understand why a man like him would choose a woman people associated with parties, fashion, and nightlife. I stood outside that room, perfectly still, realizing that sometimes a man can love the truth of you and still be afraid of the story others have written about you. I did not walk in. I did not cry loudly. I did not create a scene. I went back the way I came, each step feeling heavier than the last. In the car, my driver asked if everything was fine, and I said yes because women like me learn to say yes even when something inside them is falling apart. That night, I sat in my room and removed my earrings slowly, one by one. As if taking off the version of me everybody seemed so eager to misunderstand. I looked at myself in the mirror and wondered what Ethan would have said if he knew the truth. Would he have defended me more strongly? Would he have loved me more easily? Or would he have become just like everyone else, suddenly respectful, because my father's name made me safer to choose? The next day, Ethan called many times. I did not pick up at first. I needed to hear my own thoughts before I heard his explanation. When I finally answered, he knew something had shifted. He asked if he had done something wrong. I almost laughed because the question sounded too small for the wound. I told him I would come over later. My voice was calm, but the calmness frightened even me. There are moments when a woman stops arguing not because she has nothing to say, but because she has finally decided the truth deserves a proper stage. That evening, I dressed simply. No dramatic makeup, no statement jewelry, no performance, just me. If Ethan was going to know who I was, I wanted him to meet the woman beneath all the assumptions first. When I arrived, he was watching television in the living room, but I could tell he had not been paying attention. The room was dim, the kind of quiet that comes before a difficult conversation. He stood up when he saw me and came close, but I stepped back gently. Not angrily, just enough to show him that something had changed. He asked what was wrong. I told him to sit. On the television, a business interview was playing. I remember this because life has a way of arranging details so perfectly that later you wonder if the moment had been waiting for you. The interviewer mentioned Richard Brooks, one of the most powerful businessmen in the city, a man known for real estate, energy investments, and a level of influence people spoke about carefully. Ethan glanced at the screen and said his father respected that man deeply. I looked at Ethan and said, "Richard Brooks is my father." At first he smiled because he thought I was joking. Then he saw my face. The smile left slowly. He looked from me to the television and back again, as if the room had moved while he was sitting still. He said, "Olivia, what do you mean?" I told him exactly what I meant. Richard Brooks was my father. I was his daughter, not a distant relative, not a family friend, not someone using a name for attention. His daughter, the same woman his parents might have dismissed as a Lagos girl, came from a family powerful enough to make their own circle reconsider the meaning of respect. Ethan sat back like the air had been taken out of him. I told him I did not hide it, because I was ashamed of my family. I hid it because I was tired of being treated like a surname before being treated like a person. I told him that when people know you come from money, they rarely meet you honestly. Some become too careful. Some become too eager. Some become too respectful in a way that feels like fear wearing perfume. I wanted one person to know me without calculation. I wanted to know whether Ethan Cole could love Olivia before learning she was Richard Brooks's daughter. Then I said the words I had carried since the night I overheard him. You yourself can testify about me. With everything people say about Lagos baddies, I have never slept with you. I never used my body to hold you. I never asked you for money. I gave you laughter, friendship, honesty, and love. Ethan did not speak for a while. For once, the man who could handle boardrooms, investors, contracts, and difficult negotiations had no prepared answer. His eyes became wet, but I did not soften immediately because tears are not always transformation. Sometimes they are only shock. He said he was sorry. I asked him what he was sorry for. He said he was sorry for letting the world's opinion enter a place where only truth should have stood. He said he loved me before knowing my father's name. But he admitted he had been afraid to defend that love against his family. That was the first honest thing he said that night. Not perfect, not polished, but honest. And honesty, even when painful, gives you something solid to stand on. I asked him if he would have chosen me if my father was nobody. He closed his eyes, and the silence returned. I needed that answer more than I needed an apology. He said yes, but he said it slowly, like a man realizing that yes is not just a feeling, it is a responsibility. He said he had been living under his parents' approval for so long that he had mistaken obedience for respect. He said I had shown him a life outside work, but now I was showing him a truth outside fear. Then he reached for my hand again, and this time I allowed it. Not because everything was fixed, but because I could feel that the conversation had moved from defense to decision. Ethan was no longer asking whether his family would accept me. He was asking whether he had the courage to stand beside me before they did. The first family meeting was colder than I expected, even though I had prepared myself. Eleanor Cole welcomed me with the kind of smile that does not reach the eyes. Charles Cole studied me quietly, the way businessmen study documents they do not fully trust. Ethan sat beside me, but I could feel the tension in his body. For a few minutes, everyone performed politeness. Tea was served. Questions were asked. Where did I grow up? What did I do? Who were my people? Eleanor's voice was soft, but every question carried another question beneath it. Are you serious enough for my son? Are you clean enough for this family? Are you a passing excitement or a future embarrassment? I answered respectfully, because respect is not weakness. Sometimes it is strategy. Then Eleanor said she had seen me online. The room changed. Ethan straightened, but I placed my hand lightly on his arm because I wanted to answer for myself. She said Lagos had many beautiful girls who enjoyed attention. She said a man like Ethan needed a wife who understood discretion. She said family reputation was fragile. I listened until she finished. Then I said, with respect, Mrs. Cole, you have seen women who dress like me, women who attend places I attend, women who know how to enter a room without fear. But you have not seen me. You have seen pictures. You have heard comments. You have inherited opinions from people who do not know my heart. If your concern is my character, ask me about that. But if your concern is my confidence, I cannot apologize for it. Charles Cole looked at me then with something like surprise. Eleanor did not smile. Ethan finally spoke. He told them I had never taken advantage of him, never asked him for money, never disrespected him, never pretended to be what I was not. I almost laughed at that last part, because in one sense, I had pretended, but not in the way they thought. Charles asked about my family again. This time I looked at Ethan, and he nodded. I told them my father was Richard Brooks. For the first time since I entered that house, Eleanor's expression changed. Charles sat forward. He repeated the name as if confirming a figure on a contract. Richard Brooks? He asked. I said yes. The silence that followed was louder than every judgment they had spoken before. That silence taught me something I have never forgotten. Some people do not change their opinion because they have learned the truth. They change it because the truth has power. Suddenly my confidence looked like upbringing. My silence looked like discipline. My style looked like exposure. The same woman who had entered the room as a possible risk was now sitting there as the daughter of a man they respected. But I did not want that victory. I did not want to be accepted because my father's name made insulting me expensive. So I told them calmly that I had not come to trade surnames. I had come because their son loved me, and I loved him. If they could only respect me after hearing who my father was, then the problem had never been my character. It had been their imagination. Ethan's hand found mine under the table. This time, he did not hide it. He told his parents that he was done treating love like a bored decision. He said they had taught him discipline, responsibility, and the importance of family. But somewhere along the way, he had forgotten that a family name is supposed to protect a person, not imprison them. Eleanor looked wounded, but not angry. Charles looked thoughtful. I could tell they were not used to hearing Ethan speak that way. Maybe they had spent years mistaking his silence for agreement. Maybe he had spent years offering that silence because it was easier than disappointing them. But love has a way of demanding a voice from people who have survived too long by staying quiet. The days after that meeting were not simple. People like clean endings, but real life rarely gives them immediately. Eleanor requested another meeting. Charles asked to speak with my father. Mason called me brave, but I told him bravery would have been telling the truth earlier. Ava said I did the right thing, but even I was not sure. Ethan and I had long conversations about trust, identity, and the kind of future we wanted. I told him that if our relationship moved forward, I would not shrink myself to make his family comfortable. He told me he did not want a smaller version of me. He wanted the woman who had taught him how to laugh beside a suya stand, the woman who made him abandon his phone at the beach, the woman who asked questions no one else was brave enough to ask. When Ethan finally met my father as the man who loved me, not just as Charles Cole's son, I saw another side of him. Richard Brooks was not easily impressed. He had spent decades watching men become respectful around power and careless around women. He asked Ethan why he wanted to marry me. Ethan could have spoken about love, compatibility, peace, or destiny. Instead, he said, "Because she makes me honest." My father looked at him for a long time after that. Then he asked what Ethan would do when people misunderstood me again. Ethan said he would not wait for my surname to defend me. He would defend the woman he knew. That was the answer my father needed. Not because it was poetic, but because it showed Ethan understood the real wound. By the time our relationship became public, the same Lagos that had judged me began rewriting its own memory. People who had called me unserious suddenly said they always knew I came from a good home. Women who whispered about me at parties began calling me elegant. Men who assumed I was with Ethan for money started saying he was lucky. That is one thing about society. It often does not apologize for misjudging you. It simply changes the story and hopes you do not remember the first version. But I remembered. I remembered every look, every comment, every warning disguised as advice. I remembered because the memory kept me grounded. It reminded me that public approval is too unstable to build your identity on. Ethan proposed where our real friendship began. Not at a 5-star restaurant, not in front of a crowd of people recording us, not under a chandelier chosen for social media. He took me back to the suya spot where he had coughed from pepper and accused me of trying to end his bloodline. I laughed when I realized where we were going. He said that was the first night he felt like a person and not a position. Then he told me he did not want to spend his life being admired by people who did not know him. He wanted to be known by me, challenged by me, loved by me, and reminded by me that joy was not irresponsibility. When he knelt down, I did not see a billionaire. I saw the man who had finally learned that choosing love means choosing it in public too. Our wedding was beautiful, but beauty was not the most important part. The most important part was watching two families sit in one room after almost allowing pride, fear, and reputation to decide what love could not. Eleanor hugged me that day in a way that felt different from her first smile. Not perfect, not magical, but human. Charles shook my father's hand, and for once neither man looked like he was negotiating. Mason gave a speech that made everybody laugh, claiming he deserved credit for the marriage because he forced Ethan out of the car that first night. Ava cried before I even walked in. And Ethan, the man who once did not know how to enjoy a party, danced until his jacket came off, and his mother covered her face in disbelief. The strange thing about Ethan Cole was that he did not look lonely from the outside. No one who saw him stepping out of a black Range Rover in front of a glass office tower would have thought that this was a man who sometimes sat inside his own house at night and listened to silence like it was speaking back to him. He had the life people used as motivation: the tailored suits, the private elevator, the assistants who stood before he entered a room, the meetings where older men listened when he spoke, the kind of money that made doors open before he touched them. But loneliness does not always dress poorly. Sometimes loneliness wears a clean white shirt, signs contracts, smiles for photographs, and returns home to a dining table set for one person. I did not know all of that when I first met him. I only knew that Ethan looked like a man who had been taught how to win, but not how to rest. Even at the party, while music moved through the room and people laughed around us, he held himself like he was waiting for permission to breathe. That was what caught me, not his money, not his watch, not the way Mason Reed announced him like he was presenting a prize. It was the sadness he tried to hide under discipline. I had seen many rich men in Lagos. I had seen loud rich men, arrogant rich men, generous rich men, careless rich men. But Ethan was different. He was controlled in a way that looked painful. He smiled, but the smile stopped too early. He laughed, but his eyes did not always follow. After that night, I told myself I would not take him seriously. Men like Ethan were dangerous, not because they were bad, but because they could afford to be unsure. A regular man's confusion hurts you in ordinary ways. A powerful man's confusion can rearrange your life. He can take you into rooms where people study you like a risk. He can make you feel chosen, then remind you that his world has rules written before you arrived. I knew that. I had watched women become emotional training grounds for men who later married someone safer, quieter, easier to present to their mothers. So when Ethan started calling, I kept my answers light. I teased him, laughed with him, challenged him, but I did not hand him my heart. At least, that was what I told myself. The first weeks were harmless enough to make me careless. He would call after long meetings and ask what normal people did with their evenings. I would tell him normal people did not say normal people. He would send me pictures of expensive food from business dinners, and I would ask if the food tasted like profit margin. He started leaving voice notes because, according to him, my replies were too sharp to be enjoyed silently. I started listening to those voice notes more than once, which should have warned me. There is a moment in every friendship when the ordinary begins to feel dangerous. You start remembering what someone said. You start waiting for their name to appear on your screen. You start smiling before you open the message. That was how Ethan entered my life, not like thunder, but like a song I did not notice I was learning. People still ask me if I regret hiding who I was. The honest answer is complicated. Secrets can protect you, but they can also test people in ways they did not agree to be tested. I know that now, but I also know that if I had led with my father's name, I might never have known what Ethan truly saw when he looked at me. Maybe he would have loved me anyway. Maybe he would have moved faster. Maybe his parents would have opened their arms from the beginning. But then, I would always wonder if Olivia was enough without Richard Brooks standing behind her. And every woman deserves to know she is enough before the world reads her biography. So when people call this a love story, I agree, but only partly. It is also a story about labels: Lagos Baddie, billionaire, good family, respectable woman, serious man. These labels sound powerful until real people start bleeding under them. I was never just a Lagos Baddie. Ethan was never just a billionaire. His parents were not just villains. My silence was not just deception. We were all people shaped by fear, class, expectation, and the hunger to be accepted by the world we came from. The difference is that love forced us to stop hiding behind easy descriptions. It forced us to ask harder questions. Who are you when nobody knows your name? Who do you defend when your family disagrees? Who do you become when love costs you your image? If you remember nothing else from my story, remember this. Do not let the world tell you a woman's worth can be measured by her clothes, her confidence, her social life, or the rooms she enters. Do not assume the quiet woman has character, and the expressive woman does not. Do not assume every beautiful woman is for entertainment, and every modest-looking woman is for marriage. Human beings are deeper than the labels placed on them by people who never took time to listen. Ethan almost lost me because he loved me privately, but feared the public meaning of choosing me. I almost lost him because I wanted to be loved without my truth, while forgetting that love cannot grow forever in a room where one person is hiding a locked door. And maybe that is why I am telling this story now. Not to prove that I was secretly worthy because my father was rich. I was worthy before Ethan knew. I was worthy before his parents approved. I was worthy when Lagos misunderstood me, when strangers judged me, when people whispered, when I stood outside that glass door and heard the man I loved hesitate. My worth did not begin when my surname was revealed. It only exposed the weakness in the judgment of others. So ask yourself this: if you were Ethan, would you have defended Olivia before knowing who her father was? And if you were Olivia, would you have revealed the truth earlier? Or would you have waited to see whether love could recognize you without the protection of your family name?